Welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Paula Boros with Moving Forward Therapy and Beyond. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and this content was created with the assistance of Sherelle Viscara. And I got it in my queue. Okay, I'm too far off. All right. Okay, so let me ask the question, right? For all of you, what is a licensed and marriage family therapist, right? That's an amazing question. Let me tell you, right? As marriage and family therapists, we're also known as MFTs, and we are mental health professionals trained in psychotherapy and family systems. Remember that family systems thing, because that's going to be key, okay? We're licensed to diagnose and treat a variety of mental and emotional disorders, and we have either a master's or a doctorate degree, which includes clinical hands-on experience, okay? So remember that family systems thing I was just talking about? I'm sorry, my person doing the slides, I forgot to tell him. Good job. That is when we're doing it, we're doing it from a systemic perspective, right? So MFTs we are looking at people's relationships, their experiences, their interactions, and more, right? This could include your family, your friends, your environment, such as school, work, your community, your social settings, and so much more. And what we really look at is the symptomology, but not as individual symptomology, but how that symptomology is being presented through your family or systemic systems, okay? We're really looking at those interconnections and how each person responds within those systems and those contexts. In other words, it is the sum of the parts which equals the whole. Next. So let's learn a little bit more about family systems through this video. And we're hoping it plays. It didn't play? Nope, okay. So of course, my video doesn't play, right? So in essence, as you see this picture, there are different ingredients which make up a chocolate chip cookie, okay? And in those different ingredients, it talks about how each one has a part to play, right? And any of you that are bakers, you know, if you have too much flour or too much sugar, it creates differences within that cookie structure, correct? And so the same thing can be applied when we think about mental health. So as those different components change and life changes, then it changes within the whole system. So another example might be when we think about the thermostat. I'm personally get super cold, right? I'm one of those people that gets super cold. My significant other is super hot, like a furnace, right? So we have to find that balance. So if he puts the temperature way low, I'm over there freezing. When I put it way high, he's like, dude, it's like the desert over here. Let's find some balance, right? So each one is affected by the other. So go ahead and go next. Okay, so again, thinking about that systemic family process, right? What does that mean on a larger scale? So as MFTs, and thinking about that cookie analogy, each ingredient represents a part of the whole. So we, as MFTs, think in a non-linear process. What that means is A does not equal B, okay? Instead, each letter is its own contributing factor. In other words, when we think about that systemic perspective, it's very effective and evidence-based because it moves past that linear cause and effect thinking, and it really, which is often seen in other mental health fields. So this is something, because we're systemic, is something different than what you see in traditional mental health fields. So, and we know that we're evidence-based, so it puts us above not above, in different perspective than the rest. Next. With thinking about that MFT perspective, right? MFTs understand that context is important within the therapeutic process, which part of that includes the stigma, which prevents clients from seeking help. According to, and I hope I say this person's name right, Subu and his colleagues in 2021, mental health stigma is defined as the disgrace, social disapproval, social discrediting of individuals with mental health problems. Can any of you ever think about a time that maybe you had some stigma about anything, right? Whether it be about mental health or healthcare or any other situations, right? Well, according to these colleagues as well in 2021, they identified 4 mental health related stigmas. Next. All right, so first one, self-stigma. This refers to negative attitudes of an individual to his or her own mental illness and is also referred to as internalized stigma, right? This has been linked to poor outcomes such as failure to access treatment, disempowerment, reduced self-efficiency, and decreased quality of life. So in other words, self-stigma, we internalize it and we're doing it to ourselves, okay? The second one, public stigma, refers to negative attitudes towards those with mental illness held by general public, often based on misconceptions, fear, and prejudice. Related to public stigma is perceived stigma, which is defined as individuals' beliefs about the attitudes of others towards mental illness. Research has demonstrated the significant impact of public stigma, such as discrimination in workplaces and public agencies. So, again, in other words, this is outside influences, right? So maybe our culture, our families, our organizations say, ooh, you're seeking a mental health professional, right? So that burden now falls on you based on their stigma about mental health. The third one is professional stigma, which occurs when healthcare professionals hold stigmatizing attitudes towards their patients, which are often based on fear or misunderstanding of the causes and symptoms of mental illness, or when professionals themselves experience stigma from the public or other healthcare professionals because of their work and connection with stigmatized individuals. Professional stigma is of particular concern as it may affect the care and treatment a person with mental illness receives, including treatment for physical illnesses, thereby impacting their well-being and recovery. So we know systemically, which is more of a newer science, mental health used to be a category by itself, right? So there's something wrong with you, it's mental health, right? If your leg is broken, it's mental health. We are now learning your physical being and your mental being are combined, right? They are systemically linked. So oftentimes, especially in some populations, you will hear things like, as an example, oh, you're not having chronic pain, let's go refer you to psych, right? Or we see this in phantom limb syndrome, right? So the leg is gone, physically gone, or arm or whatever limb is no longer there, but our mind tells us that it is. So systemically, these two are now interwoven, and we're seeing more and more research on that. So when we talk about stigma in that way, if someone continues to segregate them or put them in silos, then we're not getting the best care that we can. And finally, we talk about institutional stigma, which refers to an organization's policies or culture of negative attitudes or beliefs towards stigmatized individuals, such as those with mental health problems. Such stigma can also be reinforced by legal frameworks, public policy, professional practices, thereby becoming deeply embedded in society. So what does that mean? Again, systemically, we are interconnected in all these communities, right? So if your personal job says, oh, you're going to see a therapist, or the legal system we know deals with a lot of mental health issues, instead of channeling them back to mental health, we put them in the legal system, right? And they're stigmatized around that when they're in the legal system, even though they have some mental health needs that are not being met. So unfortunately, stigma is a barrier to treatment. However, if one were to find the courage to seek treatment and move past some of these stigmas, let's explore what treatment might look like. Let's move forward. Thank you. So, on average, systemic therapy with an MFT lasts around 12 sessions. 12 sessions, and you can get back to everyday life, right? Typically, on average time for an individual is 13, with marital and couples being at 12, and family sessions being at 9. Again, you don't have to be on the couch forever. Freud was wrong, okay? Let's get you in, let's get you better, and let's get you back to work, okay? In more than 65% of cases, treatment is completed within 20 sessions. 20 sessions. That's 6 months maybe, right? It's pretty good. Within 50 sessions, more than 87% of cases are completed. I don't know what you all think, but I think in a year, my life could be totally different. How do I sign up for that? Next. So, when we think about the effectiveness of treatment, according to the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy, 2/3 of clients described advance in physical health, where 3/4 of clients in marital and couple or family therapy showed improvement in their relationships. In more than 73% of cases, parents reported improvement in the child's behavior, and 90% of clients described increased emotional development. I don't know about any of you, but those stats seem to be astronomically amazing. I would sign up for that. Next. So, thinking about the success of treatment and our systemic approach, the real question is, how can moving forward therapy and beyond help me? Let me tell you, okay? So, in our process, and not every process is the same, but in our process, we're gonna offer a 15-minute consultation. This is to measure goodness of fit. For all of you, goodness of fit is where the therapist and the client ensures that the relationship they're about to enter into, whether it be 5 sessions or 50 sessions, is going to be compatible, right? Because let's face it, MFTs are not robots. I mean, it might be cool if we were, but that personality needs to be shown, right? And we just don't get along sometimes with people. Sometimes there's a clash. It doesn't jive, right? That's okay. And if you don't get along with your therapist, then we want you to go out and seek a therapist that you will get along with. Because we know statistically, when someone goes to therapy and they don't like their therapist, or they feel like it's not a goodness of fit, they don't go back. They stop attending therapy. And as an MFT, I never want any of my clients to give up on being the better version of themselves, okay? So we're gonna do that 15-minute consultation. From that consultation, we're gonna complete documentation, which is required in all therapy settings. So once that documentation is completed, it's gonna be sent through our electronic health record, which is under all of HIPAA and state confidentiality and privacy laws and things like that. From there, your therapist is gonna talk to you about what sessions are gonna look like. What are your initial sessions, the length of time, how you're gonna schedule them, those sort of things, okay? They're also gonna talk to you about fees of service. And so it's really important to talk to them and know what you're getting into, right? Because again, we don't have an exact number of how many sessions you might need, so you wanna prepare and plan for that. Next. My paper. Okay, so I'd like to say congratulations on succeeding at your mental health, okay? Contact Moving Forward Therapy today to start your journey.
Do we have any questions or comments or anything?
Okay, I'm sorry, you both had their hands at the same time.
Oh, and when they ask a question or whatever, repeat that so
we can hear. Perfect. Mm-hmm.
Great presentation, by the way. Thank you for the information. And so we know mental health is needed in our community, right? And there's more need than there are providers.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, how do you feel if, on your side, they were to lower the requirements of education? Because I know you said you need a master's or a bachelor's.
Mm-hmm.
And it's understandable because you're getting into people's minds and stuff. But how do you feel if they lower that to bring more providers to meet the needs?
Great question. So he was talking about how that the master's and doctoral level is required, but we know that there is not enough providers to meet the needs of the community. And how do I feel about if we were to change the education requirements? You know, that's a good question. I'm going to be, as much schooling as I've done, that's bad grammar, as much schooling as I've completed, I think the education requirements are there to benefit the clientele that we're working with. And by lowering them, there is the possibility of doing more harm than good. And so in that regard, when you think about mental health as a client, right, not as a professional, as a client, then that, and going back to if you get someone that is not well trained or not well versed or there's not a goodness of fit, people stop attending. We're just lowering the standards doesn't always mean quality of care, right? And it sounds like in that case, we would only be serving quantity and not quality. So in my opinion, I would not lower the standards. But I do think we should get on board in training more mental health professionals, for sure. And I'm sorry, someone else had a question. Yes.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Excellent. What are, since you're in the field, what are like the top 3 categories that you really have to face in your, in your field?
Mm-hmm. So in exploring the top 3 categories I have to face, because I work a little differently systemically, I think most people are used to kind of items like from the DSM, depression, schizophrenia, trauma, right? And even though I deal with those every day, for me, what I face is the category of stigma. I also, because I work systemically, face the category of families, interactions, and these intergenerational patterns that we keep passing down in our lineage in a way that is self-destructing. And let's see, a third category I face a lot of is cultural influences in a way that may or may not align. So I'll give you an example. In South Florida, there was a lot from like Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, things like that. And it's exploring those instances where what is maybe be acceptable there is not acceptable here, right? And so I was particularly working with a child, and mom was like, oh yeah, I used to put them on rice and on the corner, hours at a time. Corporal punishment is not allowed in the United States. So let's teach you how to do it differently, right? Let's teach you to understand that in the United States, that's actually not acceptable, right? And so we don't want to continue to punish your child in that way. But that's a cultural understanding, and again, generationally, how it's been passed down through the lineage of, well, this is how my parents did it to me. answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I personally, after, I had counseling and all that good stuff, and I found that it took a level of humility to be able to come to the place where I actually accepted the fact that I needed counseling in that particular area of my life. I don't know about anybody else in this room that ever had counseling in certain areas of your life, but it is truly a humbling experience to be able to have a professional look at you, look at your situation and say, okay, you know what, James, you might want to think about it this way. And one of the fears personally for me going through counseling was, after my wife had passed away and, I'm trying to get back into the whole dating scene, and initially that didn't work out, and so I ended up going into counseling, and the guy looks at me and he said, well, James, he said, beyond all that other stuff we talked about, what are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I never really thought about what I was afraid of until he asked the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him flat out, I said, dude, you know what? I said, to be honest, I just don't want to be alone. I've lived my life 10 and a half years being a husband, and for me, it was like, that was the sweetest place that I could ever be outside of being a father. It was like, that's my goal. I wanted to make sure that I maintained being a husband, but it was totally out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I humbled myself and got into counselor, I was able to get, be confronted with that question. I think a lot of times for us, and especially men coming to the place where we have things that we're dealing with, but we're not humble enough to say we need to really sit down in front of a professional and say, hey, point these things out. What am I missing? Instead of just trying to figure it out my own self.
Mm-hmm.
Or YouTube or TikTok therapy. Anybody got time for that?
Oh, please don't get me started on TikTok.
It's just, I commend what you're doing. I really
Thank
do,
you.
Because I've been a beneficiary of it. Having issues dealt with in my life. So.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing your story. And we need for all of you to share your story, and maybe not in a public forum, right? But let people know it's okay. To James's point of how do we ensure and let people know it's okay, right? Don't re-stigmatize someone who may already be feeling a certain way about it. And that's the benefit of therapy is we are going to ask you to be vulnerable in a way that you've never been vulnerable before, or maybe you have, right? But it's in a judgment-free zone, in a place where you may not have gotten that judgment-free zone. And we're going to explore parts of you that you're like, I didn't even know you had. Some of you are prior military, so I'm sure you know this when you go on a ruck march, right, or on a run, and you're like, ooh, I didn't even know that muscle existed, ooh, right? We're going to do the same thing in therapy, but with your mind, right? And we saw statistically, therapy works. We know that it works, right? So we got to get you to come in the door, right? Which goes back to your question about should we lower education? When we lower education to just get people in the door, not everyone's going to have a good experience. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's almost perfect about, similar with your story is stigmatism, right? I know it takes a personal effort to humble yourself. What recommendations do you have to help get over those stigmas? Like what else can people do if they can't find the courage, like James did within himself, to go? And what do you recommend, or what is some advice to get over the rest of those stigmas?
So that's a great question. Some of that is going to be based on who you are as a person, right? And where you are sitting, right? For instance, if you're so low with depression, you may not have the physical or mental strength or ability to make that call, right? I am just personally, as a person, I'm a rip a Band-Aid kind of lady off, right? Rip it off, let's just do it, right? Let's jump in head first, right? But that may not work for everyone, and I understand that. So it's figuring out a way which works best for you individually to say, okay, and it's going to be helpful, right? It's okay, let me make this call. How do I send that first email, right? That's really a great question. And everyone's gonna figure that out in some way. What I will tell you is that I work a lot with PTSD and military, and they say things like, so avoidance is the number one thing in PTSD, right? If we pretend like it doesn't exist, it will go away, right? But we see that on a lot of disorders as well. And so what I tell people is, if you can conquer that avoidance, right, and know that you can, then you have a better life waiting for you. You just got to figure out how to muster the energy or the strength or whatever it is, because I can't tell you what's missing inside. Well, until I talk to you. But so each level, each person is going to figure out what that I don't want to live like this anymore looks like for them. And then they'll make that call. Yes?
I'll tell you what helped me. It was somebody that knew me well enough and knew that I would trust their opinion to say, listen, James, you might want to consider getting counseling. See, I think it comes from a point of a sense of community. Like, why would I be in a place knowing that you're going through something and not say something? Like, if I know I have a voice and I have that power of influence, care enough about you to say, well, you know what, James, you might need to sit down with a counselor. Just be open-minded about it so that you can be able to get the help that you need. It took somebody to look me in the face and say, James, you know what, counseling may not be a bad idea. Not only for you, but also for your daughter. Mm-hmm. So we both ended up having counseling. Mm-hmm. I took her opinion and her love enough for me to be able to say, you need help, man. And I think with having a sense of community, not only with us in this room, but if we know loved ones, if we know friends that are going through something, we should be able to look them in the face in love. Not in judgment, but in love, and say, hey, you know what, man? I want to sit down and talk about counseling. You might want to be able to, listen, I'm not judging you. What I'm saying is that I know what it did for me. I know what it's done for other people, and they've been the better for it. I think we have to be able to be influencers, be able to tell people that we love and say, you need the help.
Right, but that goes back to the point that I was saying earlier, that when it's stigmatized in our community, right? How many of you have loved ones like you to say, hey, I'm noticing this isn't who you were, right? Can we go talk to someone? It sounds like you got a lot on your plate, right? As a person, that's the challenge. As a person, you also have to be open enough to hear that feedback. You have to be in a place that you say, okay, let me go get some help, right? So it's twofold. It's being unstigmatizing your community, but also in that being ready to accept that. In recovery, so in addiction recovery, you often hear, I had to hit rock bottom, right? I don't particularly like that phrase, but the concept, the idea is that at some point you recognize, I don't want to feel this way anymore. Whatever this is, right? Whatever, right? And that's where I think that courage comes from, right? Therapy is not a sign of weakness. It takes a lot of courage and bravery to do it. But the benefits outweigh the risk. Mm-hmm.
I benefited twice.
Good, thank you for your story.
Once I got out of the military, raising 2 sons, and I think I was doing it the wrong way, and I went and got help, got mental help, and now I went right back and raised my 2 sons, and it was beneficial because they grew up, and now they talk to me about everything. They come to me when they're having problems, and when they do have problems, if I can't help them, I tell them, go seek therapy. It'll help you out. So I've benefited twice.
Well, thank you for your story.
And I see things in a different way now. Now I see the whole world in a different way because I went to therapy.
So this is my passion, so I could talk about it all day. Other questions or comments?
James said one key word is trust, because he trusted that friend for that advice. That's trust. I know for me, I went after my second tour for PTSD, and to your statistic, is true, is that professionals, I didn't have that trust with that individual, and that's what made me stop going, because I didn't trust him. So what James said is very crucial, is to have that trust to be able to go forward.
And I definitely agree with that. That goodness of fit is so important in that therapeutic relationship, because if let's say someone comes to me and they don't feel that goodness of fit, we're just going to be, and there's going to be no open feedback. There's going to be no readiness to hear what I have to say, right? And sometimes, because we don't have enough providers, we go through what I call an assembly line. Okay, this one, which is so unfortunate because people are not getting the real help that they need, right? And in some of these organizations, you're just a number, right? We're talking quantity. And for me, I never want anyone to feel, even if I'm not the right therapist for them, I will tell clients in that first meeting, if I'm not the right therapist, that's okay, right? Because we're going to find you someone who is. Because if you have a toothache and you go to the first dentist and they're like, I don't know, you need a crown, and you're like, I don't know if I believe that, and you go to the next dentist, right? You don't stop because your toothache still hurts, right? You go until you get whatever, either the answer you like or whatever is the solution to your problem, right? And so, but with mental health, we know statistically that first encounter, they say therapy doesn't work, they wash their hands of it, and they never go back. Statistically, therapists have one chance sometimes to change an opinion on someone. And so I hope that you, at some point, decide it's worth a second chance and you come back, because it is about goodness of fit. And when you trust that therapist, your world will change.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you answered part of the question. Good presentation. I learned a lot today. My question now is, what are some of the avenues one can get help? Does it have to be physical, or can it be online or something?
Yes, so currently I'm only doing telehealth. COVID, sorry. But there are plenty of resources. Like if you're uncomfortable, then you can do what we call face-to-face. So that's like in person, in a room with a therapist. There are a variety of ways therapy can be presented, right? I've seen it between art therapy and music therapy and equine therapy. So we do groups, right? So it depends on your style and what makes most sense for you. I currently do it telehealth. There's some concerns that telehealth is not as effective. However, through COVID, we've proven telehealth is just as effective as in-person and face-to-face. It's more about personal preference, I think. We've even modified, so I work a lot with young children. The babies, the little ones, like 5 and under, it's really hard to do telehealth with. But even then, you're doing what we would call parent organization, right? And so that population is a little harder, but every other population, if they can play a game online, you know how many kids I play Uno with? Yes, it's therapeutic, I promise. But it's building that relationship, that therapeutic process. So anything that we can do face-to-face, you mostly can do telehealth. Recently, one of the skills that I use is sand tray, right? And if anyone's ever heard of this, it's like putting your hands in the sand, like if you're on the beach, you're selecting items to talk about your family, things like that. I can do that online, right? You miss the textile part, that part, but I can do the same therapeutic skills and process that we've done online. So it's really up to you personally. I know some of my clients, they're like, look, I only want to see face-to-face. Okay, well, let's get you to a therapist that is doing in office sessions. So it's a personal preference.